I have never experienced something like what it's like covering a Caitlin Clark game. It's like going to a concert.
Let's dive straight into the comment that is making people absolutely lose their minds. Ryan Ruocco didn't just offer a compliment. He essentially declared to the world that covering her games is an experience unlike any other. He's a staple voice on ESPN. He's been in the sports world for decades and understands what a big league atmosphere feels like. So when he equated Caitlin Clark's games to a concert, you could almost see the haters contorting their faces into a pained, disingenuous grin. A concert? That isn't standard basketball terminology, but that's precisely the point.
I like to ask everyone we interview, and this might be a little difficult, but who is your favorite athlete in women's sports and why?
Ooh, I'll just tell you what happens when an active play-by-play broadcaster gets asked something like that. Like, even people, if they're like, oh, who's your favorite partners to work with or whatever, it's like you start thinking about, like, how do I not anger people who I have relationships with? So the way I will answer it is this. I have never experienced something like what it's like covering a Caitlin Clark game.
Caitlin Clark has morphed the court into her personal stage and her shots into show-stopping performances. This is the moment where those who just don't get it reveal themselves. They'll grumble, "Oh, it's just a bunch of three-pointers," as if every single shooter in the WNBA is nonchalantly pulling up from 30 feet while the entire stadium collectively holds its breath. No, this is fundamentally different. Ryan Ruocco articulated it perfectly. The emotional investment from the crowd when Clark elevates for a deep shot isn't merely about the numbers on the scoreboard.
It's like going to a concert. And the anticipation when she pulls up from 30 feet, the reaction of the crowd, the attention from home, the emotional investment from fans, and a broad stroke of fans, is unlike anything I've experienced in the sports that I cover. So covering her games is just a completely unique experience in the best way.
It's about the drama, the sheer unpredictability, and the thrilling possibility that she's about to pull off something so outrageous that most of her peers wouldn't dream of attempting. Let's remember, Caitlin Clark is no longer a rookie. This is her sophomore season, and she's already being treated like a main event headliner. You don't achieve that kind of status just by sinking baskets. You get it by making people feel something, and that's the part that leaves her haters completely exposed. They'll insist that other players have been doing this for years,
and it would be dishonest for me to say anything other than that if you're just talking about a regular season game to a regular season game, because there's just like a very unique phenomenon, which you guys are well aware of, around her that really makes every broadcast she's involved in feel like this big event that I love.
Sure, and perhaps a handful of dedicated fans offered polite applause when those shots went in. But Clark makes the entire arena audibly gasp before the ball has even left her fingertips. That is the difference. Let's also get real about the stakes here. For years, women's basketball has been desperate for this exact level of mainstream attention. And then along comes Clark, dragging capacity crowds into arenas, compelling ESPN to make her a constant topic, and causing opposing venues to sell out just so that fans can have the chance to boo her in person. Do you have any idea how difficult it is to be so popular that people will pay good money just for the privilege of hate-watching you? That's the kind of fame reserved for pro wrestling icons. That is pure superstar status, and Ryan Ruocco was audacious enough to say it out loud. Naturally, the basketball purity brigade detests that. They detest that Clark represents more than just statistics on a sheet. They hate that she is a cultural phenomenon, a magnet for attention, a driver of revenue, and a catalyst for debate. The very same people who championed NBA players as they became global icons now want to nitpick Clark into a corner simply because the spotlight isn't being shared equally. Newsflash, that is not how stardom operates. Some athletes are just special. Some athletes seize control of the entire narrative. Caitlin Clark is one of those athletes. Consider this. Ryan Ruocco could have chosen anyone when prompted for his favorite female athlete. He has covered countless sports, players, and eras. He answered without hesitation. He said Clark, and he didn't just drop her name. He articulated why the feeling she generates is so unique that is significant. When broadcasters, people who literally describe the action for a living, go out of their way to emphasize your presence, that is the ultimate validation. Now, let's anticipate the counterargument. The haters will claim, well, he's only saying that because ESPN promotes her. That's wrong. ESPN promotes her because she is a ratings machine. It's the age-old chicken and egg scenario. In this instance, the chicken was already a phenomenon before ESPN ever pointed a camera at it. Clark cultivated a following in college that was simply undeniable. When she was dropping 40-point bombs and logo threes at Iowa, the entire country was already captivated. ESPN didn't invent that. They are simply cashing in on it now. The concert analogy from Ruocco is genuinely brilliant when you break it down. A concert isn't just about the music, it's about the atmosphere, the lighting, the crowd reactions, the palpable energy. You don't attend a concert expecting silence. You go for the beautiful chaos of thousands of people sharing an identical moment. That is precisely what Clark has managed to engineer. Every shot she takes feels like a standalone event, and whether you adore her or despise her, you are reacting. That is what distinguishes the merely great players from the true stars. But let's not overlook the context of her second year. Typically, year 2 is when players are humbled. Defenses make adjustments. The league adapts, the initial hype begins to fade. Caitlin Clark clearly did not receive that memo. She remains the central story, the top headline, and the one that broadcasters single out in off-the-cuff conversations. That is not accidental. It happens because she is sustaining the hype, elevating her game, and demonstrating that this is no fleeting moment. And let's be brutally honest. A major reason the haters are so incensed is that Ryan Ruocco is correct, and they know he is. They cannot argue with the ticket sales, the television ratings, or the revenue. They cannot argue with the fact that Clark's name trends on social media after nearly every single game. So what's their recourse? They nitpick, they complain about her turnovers, they scrutinize her defense, they fixate on anything that contradicts the superstar narrative. Meanwhile, ESPN and the fans are simply nodding in agreement with Ruocco, affirming, yes, she is different. And look, you can certainly talk about other stars in this league. You can mention Brianna Stewart, Aja Wilson, or Sabrina Ionescu. All are phenomenal players, but not a single one of them has concocted this precise blend of hype, controversy, and raw energy. You need all three of those ingredients to break through into the mainstream consciousness. Clark has critics publishing think pieces about her on a weekly basis. Clark has opponents making veiled comments in their post-game interviews. Clark has fans planning cross-country trips just to see her play in person. That is bigger than the game of basketball. One of the things Ruocco mentioned also alludes to something much deeper: emotional investment. That's the component the haters refuse to acknowledge. To be emotionally invested in someone's shot means you have bought into their narrative. And the narrative of Caitlin Clark is that of an athlete who was hyped to an incredible degree coming out of college and has actually managed to deliver on that hype. That is the rarest commodity in all of sports. Hype usually dissipates. With Clark, the hype has only intensified. We've witnessed this in the men's game. Steph Curry generated the same effect when he began launching threes from distances that coaches once deemed bad shots. It captivated people because it fundamentally altered what basketball could look like. Clark is executing a version of that same phenomenon in the WNBA, and rather than celebrating it, some people want to pretend it's not a big deal. Sorry, but when a national broadcaster compares you to a concert, that is a very big deal. And this is where the sarcasm becomes entirely appropriate. The very same people who scream that she's overhyped are the ones who can't stop rewatching her highlights. They profess to hate her, yet they share the clips. They claim to be exhausted from hearing about her, yet they never stop talking about her. The haters are, ironically, her most effective promoters, and Ruocco just handed them another reason to simmer in their resentment. Let's proceed to the part that truly makes people uncomfortable. The ripple effect that Caitlin Clark is creating and why Ryan Ruocco stating it publicly strikes such a nerve. You see, The WNBA has always yearned for that crossover star, someone who not only fills their home arena, but makes every single road game the hottest ticket in town. Clark is precisely that, and Ruocco, by admitting it on air, essentially validated what fans have known all along. She is the show. Now, this doesn't imply that every other player is ecstatic about her level of fame. You can sense the side-eye glances in some interviews, the subtle jabs during press conferences, and that's understandable. It's natural. When one player garners significantly more attention than everyone else, egos are bound to be bruised. But therein lies the irony. Without Clark drawing in record-breaking audiences, those same players wouldn't be securing the larger broadcast opportunities they now enjoy. She is elevating the entire league, and yet some act as though she is holding them back. This is where Ruocco's comment delivers its sharpest sting. He isn't just commending Clark's skill, he's commending her effect, her power to alter how the game feels, how it is covered, and how it is experienced by the fans. That is an exceptionally rare compliment, because you cannot fabricate that. You can't coach a player to transform a basketball arena into a rock concert. It either happens organically or it doesn't. And with Clark, it happens every single night. Just think about that. Every night she steps onto the court, the entire atmosphere shifts. There's a buzz in the air before the game even starts. Fans proudly wear her jersey, even in rival cities. A legion of cameras tracks her every move, even when she's just tying her shoelaces. That is celebrity in its most unadulterated form. And for women's sports, which has fought tirelessly for this degree of mainstream recognition, it represents a monumental breakthrough. Now let's delve even further into why the haters are so provoked by Ruocco's words. They've constructed this convenient little narrative that Clark is only famous because she is aggressively marketed. But if that were the case, ESPN could have churned out a dozen Caitlin Clarks by now. They have certainly tried. They have promoted other stars in the past, and while those efforts saw some success, none of them struck the same cultural nerve. Why? Because you cannot manufacture authenticity. Clark's fame was born from people watching her in college, seeing her launch bombs from the logo, and having the collective realization, wait, this is appointment television. When Ruocco made the concert comparison, it wasn't just a piece of praise, it was a reality check. Concerts aren't about polite, reserved applause. Concerts are about chaos, unbridled energy, and people filming on their phones because they want to prove they were there. That is what attending a Caitlin Clark game feels like. And that is why the fans, even those who profess to hate her, continue to show up in droves. And let us not forget, this is her second year. She is not some shiny new object. She is not just a flash in the pan. If anything, she is proving that her impact is sustainable. That is the part that is driving her critics absolutely insane. They were counting on the hype to have subsided by now. Instead, she remains the main event. She continues to sell jerseys, and she is still the name dropped by ESPN announcers when discussing the most exciting athlete in women's sports. Some of the backlash is also rooted in jealousy over how she is single-handedly altering the economics of the sport. Ticket prices skyrocket when her team comes to town. Opponents suddenly find themselves playing in front of sold-out crowds when she visits. This positively impacts the entire league's financial health. But instead of celebrating this tide that lifts all boats, some players complain that there's too much Caitlin talk. The reality is, it's not too much, it's just more than what they were accustomed to, and that period of adjustment is proving to be uncomfortable. Ruocco essentially shined a bright light on that uncomfortable truth. Clark is special. Not just talented, not just productive, but genuinely special. And the more people like him say it, the more the haters realize their flimsy excuses are no longer viable. They can no longer hide behind the "she's just another player" argument when all the evidence screams to the contrary. Here's another piece of this puzzle. Her haters inadvertently maintain her relevance. Every cynical tweet, every bitter post-game remark, every contrarian op-ed, they all serve to fuel the machine. Ruocco's observation about the concert-like atmosphere didn't just validate her fans, it also exposed her critics as being unwilling to acknowledge the obvious. The game simply feels different because of Caitlin Clark. Period. And let's not overlook the generational component. Younger fans view her as their star. They didn't grow up watching Lisa, Leslie, or Diana Taurasi. Their entry point to women's basketball was witnessing Caitlin Clark drop 40 points in college and then immediately transfer that same energy to the professional ranks. To them, she is the WNBA, and that sense of generational ownership is incredibly powerful. It fosters a deep loyalty and keeps the momentum going long after the initial novelty has worn off. Now, what about the bigger picture? Clark isn't just elevating the WNBA, she is fundamentally influencing how networks and sponsors perceive women's sports as a whole. This translates to more coverage, greater investment, and more mainstream discussions. That's why Ryan Ruocco's words landed with the force of a hammer. They confirm that what we are witnessing isn't just manufactured hype, it's a genuine shift, and shifts make people uneasy, especially those who are accustomed to being in control of the narrative. Time for some sarcasm. The same individuals screaming overrated are the ones who have a meltdown when ESPN airs a highlight package that doesn't feature their preferred star. All of a sudden, it's bias. No, it's simply that Caitlin Clark moves the needle more. You don't like it? Go move the needle yourself. But that's the issue, isn't it? Most can't. And Ruocco declaring that Clark's games feel like concerts only adds insult to that injury. And here is the final, crucial point. Clark isn't flawless. She commits errors, she endures tough games. She is still developing as a player. But even in those moments of struggle, the crowd remains completely invested. That is the power that Ruocco was alluding to. People care deeply, whether she succeeds or fails. That is the very definition of stardom. Nobody purchases a ticket hoping to see a decent role player have a quiet, efficient 12-point game. They buy tickets for the fireworks, and Clark consistently delivers them. So when Ryan Ruocco says she's special, he isn't just talking about her basketball abilities. He's talking about her cultural relevance. He's talking about a player who is making sports feel like a major event again. And that is why the haters are seething, because no amount of nitpicking can ever erase the fact that she is the headline, she is the draw, and she is the one that kids are now imitating on playgrounds across the country. The truth is, Caitlin Clark doesn't need universal adoration. She just needs everyone to be watching. And right now, thanks to her incredible play, and thanks to people like Ruocco verbalizing what fans already feel, that is precisely what is happening. Ryan Ruocco said the quiet part out loud. Caitlin Clark is more than a basketball player. She is an event. That's why fans adore her, why haters obsess over her, and why every single game feels bigger than what the scoreboard says. What's your take? Are we watching history unfold in real time? Drop your thoughts, hit like, and subscribe for more sharp takes. Ryan Ruocco just set a match to the Caitlin Clark discourse in a way that has her critics frantically searching for excuses. His comparison? Watching her is like being at a concert. That's right, a concert. That's the level of pandemonium that erupts every single time she hoists a shot from a different zip code. And the haters? They despise that raw energy more than anything. So is Caitlin Clark truly revolutionizing women's basketball, or is she just throwing a harsh spotlight on how slow the league was to ever market its own superstars?